Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here again. Ladies and gentlemen, the aftermath of the Russian war against Ukraine in a nutshell, and especially in a situation where the war still is ongoing, will be an exciting test if we will match the challenges of the future nowadays. I will describe what happened in between, really in a nutshell, and maybe afterwards we have the opportunity to come into a discussion about one or 2 points. But at first, let me tell what happens after the annexion of Crimea in 2014, because this war is running since nearly 10 years. It started 2014 with the annexion of Crimea and the covered war in the Donbass, and Russia openly attacked Ukraine throughout the whole territory on February 24th of last year. Moscow's original plan to gain control over the entire territory of Ukraine by quickly seizing Kyiv has failed. Instead, a prolonged war of attrition is emerging. The brutality of the Russian warfare and Moscow's maximum demands make a negotiation process very difficult. In Russia, the war is accompanied by a stronger domestic repression. At the same time, the effects of the sanctions, coupled with military setbacks and high casualty figures, may increase the pressure on the political leadership in the future. In Ukraine, on the other hand, the war reinforced the national identity and the country's course towards the West. Russia's war against Ukraine calls into question basic assumptions of German and European policy towards Russia and East Europe. It is proving to be a catalyst for reorientation of the European security order and European energy policy. But the war also has effects beyond Europe, for example, on the global balance of power with China or on food security. And I think we should point out a few figures which can be the basis of a discussion later on. Very actually, we can discuss about the gas pipelines Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, which has been blown up, but which has been built after the occupation of Crimea. What was the political reason for the decision of the German government, even after Crimea was annexed, to stay independence of Russian gas development? Was it only earning more money because of cheaper gas for the production of an industrialized country? What are the results of the war in cases of economic growth? For Russia, the GDP went down by 9.7%. For Germany, the GDP went down by 4%. So it's a loss of wealth per person of 2,000 euro, each of the roundabout 80 million citizens of our country. So you see, both sides had a positive impact of cheap gas deliveries. What will happen in the future? We changed German economic policy. Even if we want to have a new energy supply in the future with renewable energies. We restarted our nuclear power plants. We restarted our coal plants. We restarted gas plants, and we implemented LNG gas from United States and other countries. Even over several years, digging LNG was forbidden in Germany. So there's a change of mindset to make sure that we can solve the situation with the war in Europe again. And we will have to pay for it with loss of wealth. And we will do it because it's the price of freedom, to make sure that in Europe you can't win with war and with violence against your neighbors. What else changed? NATO and European Union cooperation was strengthened, and not the other way what the Russian government hoped to manage. The stuck together. They cooperated much more than before, and they won new partners like the NATO candidates, Sweden and Finland. And what changed geopolitical? Geopolitical, we notice that China will watch very carefully what happens with Ukraine, because they think it can be a blueprint for their action against Taiwan. It's another good reason for the free countries in the world to make sure that nobody in year 2023 is able to win with violence against the neighbors anything. And that's very important, to make sure that there can't be a ceasefire without leaving the Russian troops out of the country again. This makes cultural diplomacy a little bit more difficult, because at the end of the day, every war will be stopped on the negotiations tables. But to make sure that you have something to negotiate, you have to clear the battlefield before. Otherwise, there is no real partnership possible afterwards, because one will dominate if you don't make sure that you can't start a new war in Central Europe. What is interesting otherwise is how to act on European community platforms. I'm working, unfortunately I have to work, I'm working for a high-tech company which is called Rheinmetall AG and will be in the DAX in the next 12 days. It's a stock exchange listed high-tech company for mobility and security. And we are one of the biggest companies, no, we are the biggest companies in defense sector in Germany. On European level, we have discussions about taxonomy, about the question what is ecological, social, and governmental acceptable to finance. We had the discussion already in the energy sector, and we still have the discussion in the defense sector. Before the war started, the taxonomy rules should make defense harmful. After the beginning of the war, there are discussions if defense could be neutral by financing. What we've seen in Ukraine and earlier in Kabul is one thing. There will be no sustainable development in the world without security. So security should be sustainable. At the one hand, the European Union finances security and defense with billions of euros, and at the other hand, the same European Union is discussing if taxonomy makes defense harmful so that banks don't finance it anymore. Nobody would have seen this difference without the war. And that's the reason why you can, in the same organization, European Union, step back, look on what you discussed before in your own community, and think about if you are in one line with all discussions. All these points will change at the end of the day also the way to cooperate in European Union like we had it before. Because it's not possible anymore that one organization in the same organization say A and the other organization in the same organization say Z. You have to coordinate it much better than it was before. And we see that all the countries which are involved in the engagement for the Ukraine in the moment forgot during, maybe not the United States, but the others mostly forgot during the time of so-called peace dividend after the end of the Cold War, to make sure that security must be secured, and to make sure that you are strong enough to take care for the the secure of your nation, of your people, and of your borders. And this will change what happened in the future. We will have to spend much more money for our defense and our security, especially in Europe, because we have to become more independent also from our partners in the United States. We are very happy that they came back to the European continent and took over responsibility for what is happening now, because European countries alone would have been too weak to manage the situation. But at the end of the day, the European countries must become independent also in security issues from the help of the United States. And I will make it with one point. I'm sorry, I know that you have the same opinion like me, but I heard about a speech of Mr. Trump yesterday or the day before, where he told that the situation in Ukraine, he would be solved before joining office after a re-election in one day. And I'm worried that it couldn't be a solution with freedom for Ukraine. And that's the reason why we have to become independent in Europe, to make sure that a situation like this can be solved from European countries alone. Of course, whenever it's possible, in cooperation with the United States of America, but we have to become independent also in military cases. And this is what will be our homework for the time after the war, which, I'm sorry to say this, I guess, which will take a long time till it ends. It will take years, I guess, because Mr. Putin, and I know that in the interview later on, Mark, you will ask me this question, he has one goal. He wants to restructure the former USSR. And he starts with all the former USSR republics which are not partner in EU or NATO. And if he wins in Ukraine, Moldova will be the next country, Georgia the next afterwards, and so on, the stans, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, what they are named, which are not members of NATO and European Union. So we have to stop at the free world the situation now in Ukraine, and that's the reason why we have to do everything what is necessary to make sure that Mr. Putin is not able to win 1 inch of the country. And I think for the input, it should be enough for a discussion. If you are interested in some of the issues I pointed out, or if you have others, let's start.
Niebel, I think, for definitely a thought-provoking and engaging keynote address, which has hopefully provoked you. Now this is your time. As I always say, these kinds of conferences, half of the work is the speaker, the other half is up to you. So if you don't ask any questions, you only hear what he says. Now is our chance to debate, to discuss, to ask really any kinds of questions that you might have directly related to the speech, as well as also in general. As I said, Mr. Niebel is a man of great experience around the world, whether it's questions on soft power, cultural diplomacy, etc. This is a special opportunity. So please don't be shy. As always, raise your hand if you'd like to pose a question or make a comment, and briefly introduce yourself so we know who you are. Who would like to go first? Yes, okay.
شكرا. الحقيقة أنا السؤال فيما يتعلق بالحرب الأوكرانية الروسية، يعني حسب قناعتك هل هناك أمل ولو كان بسيطا لإيقاف الحرب والدخول بمفاوضات جادة من أجل إنهاء الحرب وإعادة الحياة الطبيعية إلى أوكرانيا؟
Do you think that there could be like a solution, political solution between Russia and Ukraine, and so that the life come back normally, like before, like a political dialogue?
I'm quite sure at the end of the day there only can be a political solution, but to manage the way to this political solution, you have to be successful on the battlefield first. Because Mr. Putin says from the beginning, he wants to discuss political solutions as long as the result is what he wants. And that can't work.
يقول أن الحلول يجب دائما أن تكون على الطاولة، ولكن لا يمكن أن تكون الحلول على الطاولة بدون أن تفوز في الحرب. مثل يجب أن تكون فائز في الحرب ثم تذهب إلى طاولة المفاوضات.
أعتقد الفائز في الحرب يعني استمرار الحرب، وهذا ما يؤدي إلى دمار أكثر.
He's saying that, but this could lead to like to the war going on to and indefinitely because the winner. You are saying that we should be like winning in the battlefield. That means that there will be no like solutions because everyone is trying to win. On the
السؤال
Yeah, Ukraine has to win this war at the one hand, and Mr. Putin has to lose it. At the other hand, we have to tell both parts of the story. And he will not lose if he gets 1 inch of the country of Ukraine. And this would be a motivator for him to go on further. That's the reason why he can't be allowed to get 1 inch.
يقول إنه يجب أن تفوز أوكرانيا بالحرب في الأرض ويجب أن تخسر روسيا ولا يمكن أن ندع بوتين أن يأخذ أي شبر من أوكرانيا بل عليه أن يخسر في الحرب.
شكرا.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Dirk, I'm an Iraqi journalist. I'm working for Iraqi TV, but as an ex-member of the government in Germany, what do you think? How far the German economy is able to pay the bills of that war? I understand your point of view, of course, that Putin should not gain one meter, but in the end of the time, we should pay the bills. But how far we are able to financing that bill of the war? Thank you.
I don't know where the end will be, but we have to pay for it, of course. And as I mentioned before, this is the price for freedom and the price for democracy. And the price for freedom means if Mr. Putin would win, we would have no freedom for lots of years in the future. And the world will change its face maximum. And for this, yes, we will have loss of wealth, as we have already, and we will have to change our way of working in our economy, because one of our way to work was based on cheap energy and high-tech output products. We still can produce high-tech output products, but we have to say goodbye to the cheap energy like we knew it before, especially when we still want to step out from nuclear power plants. And I think this is the biggest mistake Germany can do. We are stepping out of all working energy systems and buying energy from nuclear power plants from France. This is stupid, as long as we have younger power plants than the French has, and other countries are building new nuclear power plants, especially to minimize the CO2 footprint. So it's even if my party is part of the government, it's a stupid politics. And hopefully the mind in the government will change in this point, because this will become expensive, not only for the German economy, it will especially become expensive for the people in the country.
Yes. My question is in line with what he just asked, and I'm looking at the political fallout for Europe, not just for Germany. As you can see, in various European cities, protests are beginning to go on already about to end this war, And I think for Putin, the game for him is to, as long as he can, to drag this war so that he will exhaust Europeans and as well also target 2024, next year's election in US. Now, even a situation where we have either of the Republican candidates, it could be Donald Trump, it could be Ron DeSantis, these are Putin guys, you understand? Yep. In a situation where we have either of them as US president, and maybe this war drag until next year, as you can see on the streets of Berlin and other Europe, in Paris and all of that, people are already beginning to protest that we are tired of our government supporting this war and all of that. Is EU and other European leaders looking at the political fallout and what is going to happen? Because Putin, I think, is ready to drag this war as long as he can. And we have seen that he's ready, and for some reason, maybe unfortunately for the Russians, they really don't even know how to manage, but he is ready to drag it. So what are the things? Are the European leaders and EU leaders ready for the political fallout in case Putin drags this war until next year? Because a lot of Europeans are getting a little bit, frustrated already.
Partly I'm with you. I'm quite sure that European leaders are ready to stay the situation, especially because the polls say that most citizens of the European countries have the same opinion. But I'm quite with you, Mr. Putin will fight this war as long as it's possible in hope that there will be a change in the White House. But he is the only one who can stop this war in one day, not Mr. Trump. He only has to withdraw his troops out of the country. If Ukraine or Europe would stop the war, it would be the end of Ukraine. So there's only one way to weaken the Russian army as much as possible to make sure that they have to leave the country again, and then you have the bottom from where you can start a political solution. You have to stand it.
Hello, thank you very much for your speech. My name is Anna, I'm a student of ICD, and my question is, do you think the economic sanctions implemented by European Union against Russia are effective? And do we already see by now some positive effects out of sanctions? Thank you. And do they bring us closer to the peace from your perspective?
Yes, I think, but unfortunately sanctions need its time. We know it from the sanctions against apartheid South Africa, which took around about 20 years till it was really working. But we see it in Russia now. The GDP went down 9.7% in 1 year war. And you see the production is going down, also the civilian production in Russia. They are still producing cars, but they don't produce airbags anymore. So they sell the produced cars without airbags. And things like this. It's small pieces, and there are also companies and sometimes countries which try to find ways, not fulfilling the sanctions, of course, but this happens every time. At the end of the day, it makes it much more difficult for them to produce what they need. My fear is it is quite different. When you watch the battlefield, you see not the modernest equipment they have. So my opinion is they clean their stocks from the back. So they start with the old stuff, with the old tanks, with the old ammunition, with the old rockets, which also kills people, but not so well known whom. Yeah? And then later on they come to the modern equipment, to the better stuff. And what we have to take care for is that we don't use the most modern weapons, and this is obviously also the most expensive weapons, to shut down old drones and old rockets. We have to use the modern stuff for the modern stuff of them, which will come to the battlefield later on, I guess. I'm afraid it will happen later. So we have to use the time in between to produce. And for this, and that's now my two hats as a former politician and nowadays as a representative of defense industry. We can raise our production immediately when we get contracts. The governments only have to say, produce, we will buy. Then we can raise our production immediately. And we did it already, of course, in areas where we are still, where we know that the products will be sold, of course. But to raise the production, to invest in new production lines, in new factories, you need a contract from a government which says this investment will be safe in the future because we will be your customer for these kind of products. And this time must be used for production. And as long as it takes till governments understand that they have to order, it will be more dangerous for all of us.
Thank you very much. Okay, another hand in the back, if you could bring the microphone.
Thank you for the speech. I came a bit late and I should have missed a great deal from your speech. I'm Ibrahim and I'm a student here in ICD. My question is, don't you think the war, the demands of Putin before the war was negotiable, mostly, especially demilitarizing Ukraine and maintaining neutrality? When we compare the situation to the Cuban crisis, I think there's we can make some analogies. When Soviets installed missiles in Cuba, United States went crazy. It was a near war, and it was fortunately avoided. Don't you think the terms of Putin were negotiable? Thank you.
No, they haven't been negotiable. Ukrainians tried to do it, and the demands of Mr. Putin are still the same like they have been before the war starts. He wants to end the country of Ukraine. He wants to be Ukraine again a part of Russia, like in USSR times, without own government, without a secure territory, without their own culture. And this is not negotiable, of course not. So it's no way, as long as these demands are. And when Mr. Putin say, as long as you don't fulfill my demands, I can't stop the war, then you have to stop the war with military activity from the other side, as long as he don't withdraw his own troops out of the country. It's not his country. He has nothing to do there. Also on Crimea and Donbass, it's not Russia. You see, Ukraine has been the third biggest nuclear power after the end of USSR. And they decided to give away all the nuclear weapons. For this, they got a contract which also was signed by Russia, that their country and the borders of the country are accepted and secure. I think one of the results of this war will be no one in the world will give away its weapons again. And other countries will try to get weapons which make sure that they can be secure. And then we have a new dimension of the discussion. What about nuclear weapons in Iran? What about nuclear weapons in North Korea? When you see that Ukraine, after giving the weapons away, and they decided themselves that they want to give them away, that they will have war afterwards, and the neighbor tries to kill them, nobody else will take weapons away again, will give weapons away again. And I think this is one of the results we have to discuss politically, how we manage in the future arms control, especially nuclear weapons control. But even if a country is not so rich to be able to finance nuclear weapons, creating biological weapons or chemical weapons is very cheap, but unfortunately also effective. Mr. Putin opened the box of the Pandora. That's the biggest problem, to close it again.
Thank you very much. A final question or comment? Anyone? Yes, okay, please, go for it.
Thank you. So I have another question. So you mentioned that Putin wants to re-establish USSR, but in 2008 there was already a war with Georgia. Why do you think this war didn't escalate? Because it was only 3 days war. Like, if he wants to take over the whole country, why he didn't go further in Georgia, from your perspective?
Yeah, during my time in office as a federal minister, I traveled all these areas. I've been in South Ossetia and in Transnistrian and in whatever it's named. In Georgia, it was quite different, like in Moldova, because the government accepted what the Russian decided. That was the real reason for stopping the war. And something else was different. Parts of South Ossetia and what's the name of the other part in Georgia? Can't get it. But yeah, the parts in the north of these territories have been Russian already, and they wanted to get the parts in the south on Georgian territories additionally, and Georgia noticed when the tanks entered the country that they have no chance to fight against Russia because they got the information that nobody will fight for them too. It was in 2008 when Georgia wanted to join the NATO, and NATO states said, no, you're not ready because you don't live in a secure situation. And this was a signal that there will be no help for Georgia from other countries outside. And that was the reason why the Georgian government accepted the situation. They didn't like it, of course, but they accepted it, and then he stopped the war, yeah. And in Donbass, it was, in Crimea, it was different. Ukrainian government never accepted the situation. There was still, since 2014, an ongoing war under international political notice. There have been several rounds with Minsk peace negotiations. Nobody accepted the results. They all accepted the results, but nobody did what they had to do on both sides. And that was a quite different situation. In Georgia, after 3 days, it stopped.
Are there any other questions or comments? Because if not, we're actually more or less right on time. I would suggest let's take this opportunity to express, first of all, our sincere gratitude once again to Dr. Dirk Niebel.
Thank you.